Hi, everyone, and welcome to Human Centered. I'm Nick Brunker, a Director of Experience Strategy at VMLY&R, and your host for the show. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we're going to explore how a sharp focus on the employee experience and culture can drive positive customer experience outcomes and ultimately drive business value. We've got a trio of amazing folks to unpack that with us, and it's my pleasure to welcome in John Mulvihill, Shanice Gipson, and Lauren Ziegler to the show. Thank you all so much for being with us. Why don't we start with a round of quick intros? John, we'll start with you. Tell us a bit about yourself and the many things that you do at VMLY&R.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having us today. This is really a great opportunity. My role at VMLY&R is I'm Chief of Staff for John Cook and our executive team. In that role, I'm involved in all sorts of crazy fun special projects on an ongoing basis. I've been at the agency almost 15 years now. Throughout the entire time, I've been part of our communication or marketing team, and I'm still very closely associated with that group. But today, kind of working across both our comms team, HR, and then the office of our CEO. But almost since the first day I got here, I've been very interested in what the agency does in terms of giving back in our communities. And so I've been just one of the most fortunate people ever to be able to be involved in the VMLY&R Foundation and different things we're doing in the community. So that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome, John. We'll get a little bit more into the VMLY&R Foundation in just a bit. Shanice, welcome.
Thank you. I am a web developer at VMLY&R, and I have been working here for almost 2 years. I'm still very new and still learning of all the great things that we're doing here at the agency, but I'm heavily involved in foundation and our DEI efforts, and I'm just glad to be here today.
Thank you again for joining us. Last but certainly not least, they call her LZ. It's Lauren Ziegler. Lauren, thanks for being with us.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, my name is Lauren Ziegler, but you can definitely call me LZ. My role, official title is Senior Manager of the VMLY&R Foundation, and I just have the chance to lead community outreach across all of our offices through that role. I'm based in Washington, D.C., joined the agency back in 2012. From Kansas City, and had the chance to relocate to Washington, D.C. a couple years ago.
That's very cool. Thanks again for making the time to be with us. Beyond the obvious business benefits of good employee experience like lower employee turnover, lower recruiting costs, there are clear ties between the quality of employee experience and downstream CX success. Just one of many examples, I'm sure. Dell found that their customer net promoter scores were twice as high for experiences delivered by highly engaged employees compared to those less engaged colleagues. A Yale study a few years back proved similar results. John, you mentioned you've been at the agency a long time. Talk about how you've seen this dynamic evolve over the years.
Sure. At VMLY&R, we talk a lot about connected and connectedness. I think kind of our theme for across the agency is we create connected brands. And I've just seen over the years that as we have invited employees to share causes and nonprofit organizations that are important to them and their families, that it just spreads. It's just cumulative. The more we learn about causes that our employees really feel that are important to our employees, other employees pitch in. It just really kind of spreads and grows in the most positive way and really extends this idea of connectedness. And not only within a given city or a given office, but there's been so many things that now have spread across between multiple offices or across the U.S. and now really around the world. So I just think that feeling of connectedness resonates with employees and especially with newer employees. I think a lot of new employees learn as they learn about VMLY&R and they go through the recruiting and the onboarding process. They're the ones who are coming in with the best ideas and new, fresh ideas and really challenging us to become involved in even new and different ways. So I don't know if that specifically addresses what you're getting at, but it really feels this whole idea of connectedness through community outreach permeates the entire organization.
You pressed on something that was super interesting there, and that is the executive buy-in. To permeate the organization, there has to be the top-down approach in a sense, but you're getting a chance to see how, from the very, very highest leaders in the company, This type of a mentality is really part of the fabric and the DNA of VMLY&R, isn't it?
Well, it has, and there's absolutely universal kind of executive or upper management buy-in. But I really want to be clear, and I think this will come out in the discussion today, is that the foundation and really everything we do in terms of community outreach is driven by across the employee base. There's not some executive team that gets together and says, well, here are 2 or 3 things we really hope that the agency gets involved in this year. It is everything comes from, I say the bottom up, and I don't mean that in a bad way in terms of bottomness, but it really, it's horizontal in the most wonderful way, and the ideas and the volunteer opportunities and suggestions for pro bono work and what have you come across the board, and I think that's one of the most kind of beautiful organic parts of the program.
Lauren, talk about the impact that culture and the employee experience and the engagement has on the client relationships and the client work that we do.
Absolutely. I think when I think of purposeful work, I think that can go in many different directions. It's either kind of bringing in the charitable interests of our clients, understanding what those kind of passion points of the clients might be and being able to support those in different ways, but also being able to kind of get to know clients on a personal level. I think that's kind of the way that the foundation and the agency has always approached that kind of client relationship. Being able to kind of embrace charitable passions beyond the day-to-day work. I think that comes to life in different ways. I think something that comes to mind is very recently we had a client relationship with United Rentals, where we had a relationship that was close enough where they heard that our team was volunteering, doing volunteer days together, and they said we would love to join that. We would love to do that alongside you. And so a few months later, there was a session where not only just our team was volunteering, but they were volunteering alongside their clients. So it's that kind of symbiotic relationship that I think is more and more common, especially within those relationships. We really get to work with one another more closely and understand kind of those charitable interests.
Segueing now to the VMLY&R Foundation, you've all mentioned it a bit off the top. Lauren, would love for you to tell us a bit more about what it is and what it stands for.
Sure. So VMLY&R Foundation, very simply, is community outreach. It's an umbrella term we use very commonly, but it really kind of naturally flows into 4 key kind of focus areas of community outreach. And that ranges from volunteerism, how we give back our time, to pro bono work, how we give back our skill sets, community leadership, supporting employees kind of in leadership roles in their community above and beyond their day job. And then there's a very tangible piece of that community outreach that's tied to financial giving and donating to organizations that our employees care about. And I think the beautiful thing is the foundation, it's over the years as different agency partners have come together, especially over the last 3 years, every single agency has come with a very unique history, tradition of giving back. And so the foundation continues to evolve in a way that's, it encompasses everything. And I think that umbrella term, it helps speak to every piece of community outreach and how it, comes to life on a day-to-day basis. And I think John might talk a little bit about the employee giving component and some of the history behind that program.
Absolutely. And before we hear a little bit more about the history of the foundation, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about Foundation Day, which is that annual event that's such a special day for all of us. And I'd like you to tell us a bit more about why it's such an important aspect of VMLY&R.
Foundation Day is next Thursday. So yes, it's coming up very quickly. And it's a really special tradition. It's a day each year that happens typically in the month of September. And it's a day that we normally kind of pre-pandemic would close our office doors and go out and serve in the community. And in the last couple of years, that's turned into, closing our laptops for the day and being able to kind of serve very locally. And the really great thing about Foundation Day, it's a global event. So when you talk about connectedness, it's one of our most connected days of the year across the global network. Every single office shuts down and volunteers in a way that's personal to that team. So you can see a variety of projects. We get to track it on photos, on social media, and kind of see where people are volunteering. And I think the really, really beautiful thing that's happened over the last couple of years in response to the pandemic is that we've opened it up to a program where employees can choose what they want to do on that day. They can do something individually for a cause that they choose. They can incorporate their family members and friends, or they can opt into some small group opportunities that are kind of more centrally organized. So it's definitely one of my favorite days of the year. I'm so excited for it. And each of us on this call has, been working really hard the last couple of months to bring it to life.
Very, very cool. I think one of the things for me personally that is so cool about Foundation Day is how every single office around the globe gets to do something a bit special for their particular region. We're all obviously at it together and doing the cause on the same day, but every individual office and region can kind of do their own thing and give back in the way that makes most sense for their community. And I know, Shanice, we talked about it in the pre-interview. This is a big aspect of why you chose to come to VML in the first place. Talk a little bit about that.
So I attended an event that was held at VMLY&R in Kansas City. And David, who's the CTO at our organization, was just talking about all the great things that VML is doing, and mentioned foundation and how it was a employee kind of run foundation. It's not, like John said, ran by executives and then everyone kind of just goes off what they say. And so I was like, oh, I need to join. I need to get a part of this however I can. And I did exactly that. I remember opting in for foundation, signed up, and then I think John will talk about it, the 2-for-1. But I donated and they matched, and I was like, okay, this is super easy. Like, there's not a lot of red tape. I definitely thought there would be more of a process, if you will, or like hoops you have to jump through when you're suggesting an organization, but it's not like that at all. And so if there's something that you're passionate about at VMLY&R, we can just be like, hey, we learned about this nonprofit. They're doing really good work. I would like to highlight them or, donate to them. Is there something that we can do? And I feel like LZ and John do a really good job, and other foundation members, of like, okay, let's see what we can do. Who do we have in network that can help? And it's always kind of crazy to see like how something starts off small and an idea or a passion project, and then it turns into this big thing that we all can contribute to.
John, I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about the VMLY&R Foundation's history, then the VML Foundation when it first started, and how it's grown over the years.
You bet. In fact, Shanice just mentioned something that's kind of LZ in my mantra, and that's start small. Every time, there with new employees, we often get people who feel a little intimidated. They say, God, we see all these things going on, and they look like longstanding traditions and very big, and so many people are involved. And LZ and I tell them, hey, listen, everything you see today started with one person raising their hand, making a suggestion, and other people going, yeah, I'll pitch in, I'll help you. So I love that notion of start small. And speaking of that, if you go back to the early days of VML, which is both LZ and I started when it was VML and now VMLY&R, the founders, the V, the M, and the L, they like to tell a story that they didn't really have a profitable client for a year or two after they started the business. They were mainly giving away their services, so they were the ultimate pro bono machine in the earliest days. This is the early 90s. And then they, through hard work, skill, and a little luck, they landed their first profitable client, which was Northwest Airlines. But that's a whole different path. It's my understanding that almost immediately, I think it was the first, maybe about a year in business, the first maybe summer that the company was operating. So this is the early 90s. A group of about 20 or 25 individuals had heard about a program in Kansas City where they could go out and donate basically manual labor to assist somebody who really needed it. So everybody on a summer day, they took off work. They brought their own tools, work gloves, tools, shovels, rakes, and hammers and saws and whatever. And they went to a woman's home in the central part of Kansas City who really needed home repairs. They spent the entire day doing home repairs. They had such a great time. They accomplished a great deal. The homeowner was incredibly grateful. Of course, we got more out of it than she did. The way these things work. The crew then rolled over to a pizza joint, had pizza, and drank a couple beers, and just they said this was something, we need to keep doing it. And that was really the beginning of Foundation Day. Very, very small, humble beginnings. And just kind of demonstrates that, a handful of people can start something that then grows into what's going to happen on September 30th this year, which is almost 13,000 people in 55 offices around the world, doing the widest variety of projects and volunteer efforts that you could possibly imagine. Started with just a handful of people. So that's kind of how it all started, and so the really started from the very beginning, and it's just grown ever since.
You talk about starting small. What are some other tactical things that leaders can do to start getting their efforts to build an employee culture to snowball?
I think one of the most important things that we've learned over the years is that the projects and the causes that have a personal connection to one or more of our employees are the ones that other employees want to participate in. There's so many great causes. There are millions of great causes in the world, and we all see things on our phones and read things and whatever. But when somebody's willing to stand up at an all-agency meeting and say, "Hey, here's something that's affecting myself or a member of my family or my next door neighbor, and if anybody's willing to pitch in, give me, send me an email or see me after the meeting. I'll be standing over here on the side." Those are the things that people gravitate toward, not something that Shanice or LZ and I sit in a room and cook up. It's when somebody shares that personal story, and people want to help, people want to rally, and it's both on an individual basis and on a community-wide basis. There was tornadoes hit Nashville last year, and we have such a strong group in Nashville, and we do, and people were like, "How can we help? We got to do." That night when things were happening and the news, bulletins were coming across the news, LZ and I were receiving text and email messages saying, "We're going to do something, right? What are we going to, let's go, let's rally the troops tomorrow morning." And we did. So it's, I guess it's that personal connection that makes all the difference.
And once you've started building the momentum and it starts to become an operating model, Lauren, tell me about how you keep that momentum and some tips you can provide to our listeners.
I think just going off of what John was describing, I think a huge piece of this is having a program that is open and flexible and that evolves over time. We purposely don't have specific giving focus areas in terms of the types of organizations we give to. And so what that allows is that every year we have foundation members or new employees joining, and they're jumping in and suggesting organizations, or there's world events that occur. And the foundation, because it is a flexible program and can change over time, I think that that foundation of the foundation is really important. It's critical. And so in terms of momentum, I think that's just a huge thing in terms of a tip for someone starting a foundation. Keeping it flexible, try not to have too many, like Shanice said, red tape, being able to, we have an advisory committee for the foundation, and it's a little a little C for advisory committee, because we purposely don't want it to be a stuffy board. We want it to be people who reflect the foundation, reflect the agency, across the board, from department to tenure within the company. And they're the people really kind of being, the ears to what people care about, what's important, and how to really rally behind. So I think those are the two things I would say for momentum, is being able to have a good pulse of your employees and being able to kind of make decisions quickly and activate quickly.
Shanice, we talked about this earlier, the power of choice in all of this, being able to do something because you want to be a part of it versus just another company box to check. Tell me more about that aspect of this, when the power of involvement is really a choice and not necessarily something that's forced upon you.
Right. I definitely think that Foundation does a really good job of encouraging and empowering. And we've talked about a lot here, how staff members can, if there's a passion project that they have, they can bring an organization to Foundation or apply for a grant. Again, it's not something that, you need a lot of checks and balances to get. There's rules, but there's not a ton for what we do. As Lauren says, we're very flexible, but I would say we are definitely empowered as employees to pick and choose, and also when we can give that extra time. There's no one that is mandated or forced to volunteer. So if a project picks up or things change, like, you can step away or you can come back, and I really like that part of foundation because it is also flexible with how much you can commit time and energy and things like that.
It seems like the flexibility angle is an important piece to consider for those listening who are trying to gain momentum in their efforts. One thing I failed to mention earlier that is another great example of that is how VMLY&R provides its employees volunteer hours every year that they can use at their discretion to give back in their individual communities, regardless of whether or not they're in the foundation. John, tell us more about how this came to be at the agency.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Every employee in the U.S. has 16 hours of paid community service time over and above Foundation Day. And quite honestly, if they want more hours and want to use more hours of paid community service time, they can. There's no cap on it per se. And it's funny. It's years ago when LZ and I were kind of promoting that out, we used to say, you have 2 days of community service. And we would anecdotally hear back from employees go, I'm kind of busy. I don't have a full day to contribute. And I love Foundation Day, but other than that, And we would say, and then finally we changed it. Instead of saying 2 days, you have 16 hours. Of course, it's the exact same amount of time, but the positioning is different. Use an hour here, use 2 hours on a different day, take a half day. And those are really meant to be more personal hours that, it's really in the broadest sense, community betterment. So, if there's a reading program at your school, at your kid's school, if there's something in your neighborhood, for beautification, you want to volunteer at the library. So, it's not necessarily going to a soup kitchen or to a food pantry or whatever. You can do that for sure, and lots of people do, but it's much broader in terms of how do we make our community a better place and what's personal to you. Take an hour. The other thing we've really worked hard to promote is that don't think you're like sneaking off to do it and it's something you need to hide. Tell everybody, tell your team. Maybe somebody will go with you. You never know. We might ask you to stand up at one of the weekly all office meetings and just share your experience with others. So those have just been a really, really wonderful benefit that more and more people are taking advantage of. LZ, why don't you share, if we can brag on one of our groups within the company? We have a team, our discoverability team in our connections group, Team Disco, is doing just the most wonderful thing this year. LZ, do you want to share that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it was born out of 2020. So going into this kind of more remote environment, they said, what's something that we can kind of connect the team going into 2021 as a good goal? And so they prioritized, everybody was really, all in with the idea of let's challenge each other to each use our full 16 hours of community service, and not just use them, but we'll track it after you volunteer, submit your hours, which is counter to what we were just saying in terms of keeping it wide open. But what they wanted to do is make sure that they were hitting all across the team, hitting all of their hours, and in another way, kind of sharing employee spotlights of causes that were important to them. So every month, there's an individual on the team who kind of gathers all that information, then shares that out in a newsletter and spotlights team members, what they were volunteering, who they volunteered with. And I think it's just, I think we just got an email from the team lead that they've used 60% of the hours. That was their goal. So I think they're tracking pretty well in terms of how much time they have left in the end of the year. But just, it's a really cool model and so simple. And I think it's great that it's been such a collective effort, across all the cities that team kind of spans.
That's so awesome. Before we run out of time, we normally end our show with some fun facts about our guests, but thought in the spirit of the conversation today, it'd be great to hear about the causes that you all care about in your communities. So why don't we go down the line and start with John?
Well, about 10 years ago, I was introduced to an organization called the Police Athletic League, or PAL. And it's a national organization that exists in darn near every city in the United States. And as it turns out, the organization in Kansas City is very robust in terms of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department committing 5 officers to staff a community center after school and on the weekends. And this is personnel, police department personnel. They're not out in a squad car during the day. They are literally working with kids. And it's in a very kind of a tough neighborhood in the central part of town. And when I first kind of went over there, they were doing great things, but they said we could use some marketing help. And literally, as I got there for my first visit, They had an old rickety van that they used to kind of drop kids off and pick kids up. And on the side of it said, "Playgrounds, not prisons." I was like, oh boy, I get the sentiment, but I think we can help you a little bit with positioning. And so we took it on as a pro bono. We, the agency, took it on as a pro bono project. Tons of people contributed time and effort and expertise. And today the motto of the Kansas City PAL organization is "Kids and Cops Teaming Up," which is definitely a little more on the mark than "Playgrounds, Not Prisons." It's an amazing organization. I've been privileged. I sat on the board for many years, and now I'm just a frequent volunteer. A really cool side story is our client Intel was doing a special promotion to share processors and laptops with kids who might not have access to such thing. And they literally gave us 10 brand new laptops, and they said, "Will you pick an organization in Kansas City that has deserving kids?" And the team came to me and said, "How about PAL?" And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had goosebumps. And we, along with a couple of members of the Intel team, not long ago, we got to go down to PAL, and they selected 10 different kids spanning age groups and boys and girls. And oh my gosh, talk about, making an impact in that community and with those kids. And anyway, so PAL is my the one I really wanted to share.
That is so terrific, John. Thanks for sharing that. Shanice, what about you?
So my organization that is also tied to Foundation is We Code KC. It's a local nonprofit that teaches kids in the urban core how to code, just because they're not getting access to those things that more affluent neighborhoods, they have coding classes. And that also started off small. So last year, my lead was like, "You should probably, sign up We Code," because she knew I worked with them. I was still kind of new, so I didn't understand Foundation and how easy it was. And she was like, "Oh, you probably can just, submit the form for a grant." And I did, and it got approved. And it's actually grown. In this year, I did another grant for them this year, but also we're doing pro bono work for them, and helping them with their rebranding as well. And so, yeah, that's one organization that I'm really close to, and the Foundation has.
And a whole bunch of future VMLers right there is what that sounds like. Lauren, how about you to wrap things up?
So probably the organization I've been supporting the longest is an organization called Girls on the Run. It's all focused on building kind of character development for young girls. And when I was in Kansas City, I was been a coach for various schools kind of throughout the city. But most recently in Kansas City was with Primitivo Garcia. Myself and a couple other colleagues would leave work just a couple hours early, once or twice a week, and we would go over and use our volunteer hours coaching the girls in the program at that school. And since moving to DC, I've been a coach for one season and then a virtual coach over the last year and a half. And just really great organization. Can't say enough good things about it.
Friends, it's been such a pleasure having a chance to sit down and chat with you more about the Foundation and building that employee culture here at VMLY&R. I know it's been a very busy handful of weeks getting ready for Foundation Day, so it means a lot you were able to carve out some time in your busy schedule to hang out with us for a little bit. John, Shanice, Lauren, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
And thanks to you all for listening to Human Centered as well. To learn more about our CX practice and our approach to the work, check us out online at vmlyr.com/CX. We'd also love to hear your feedback on the show. Drop us a rating and offer up your thoughts wherever you listen to your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, and more. Have a topic idea or just want to drop us a line? You can connect with me on Twitter at Nick Brunker, or just shoot us an email. The address is humancentered@vmlyr.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.